So single action pistols are the oldest design of semi-automatics, and they're also the simplest in theory to use, but it seems some people make them a little more complicated than is necessary. Alright man, take a seat, buckle up. Ordinarily we'd start with orientation of the car here, but we got calls pending and we got to get to them. So, we're rolling. We're going to have to learn on the way. Right, today, So why would we want to carry a cocked and locked pistol as a duty weapon? Well, there's a few advantages that they have that a lot of people don't think of right off the bat. Let's talk about the mechanical advantages first. A cocked and locked pistol gives us a nice, crisp, single-action trigger pull every time we fire the gun. From first shot to last shot, we're getting that same trigger pull, which means we don't have to learn multiple different trigger pulls for the same gun like we do with DASA pistols. And the triggers come out of the box and can be tuned even further better than most striker fire guns, with a few exceptions these days. But I really haven't found a pistol that is striker fired that can be tuned to the same nice crisp trigger pull as you can get on a custom 1911 or on a Browning high power. So this gives us advantages in accuracy and rate of fire that we really don't get with other pistol platforms. Now what are the disadvantages? Well, we have the social stigma disadvantage of that cocked hammer, and people that know just a little bit about handguns but not a lot about handguns get very freaked out by that cocked hammer. Of course, if we know quite a bit about handguns, we know that this is one of the oldest handgun designs, and so that safeties and trigger geometry have been perfected to the point where these are almost fail-safe. Even this 1968, 1969 model Browning high power, you don't have to worry about it going off on its own as long as you have the safety on. The only case I've ever seen where a cocked and locked pistol went off accidentally and the safety was on was when a police officer brought one into an MRI machine because of a technician who didn't understand when he asked him about having his pistol on him and he was going to get an MRI. MRI machines create magnetic forces that are ridiculously strong that bypass all the safety devices that are normally in the gun. That's not a normal situation, and MRI machines will do that to any type of handgun that you bring into the MRI room and actually put into the machine. There's so many magnetic forces pushing so many different directions that it is very, very easy for it to bypass all of the safeties and make the gun go off, which is why there's big signs on the outside of an MRI machine room. But that's an extreme case of a firearm accidentally going off because the safety system failed. Now, I'm sure if you have a 90-year-old 1911, the safety system will eventually fail. We're talking about modern handguns that you would use as a duty weapon, and that doesn't really apply there. So mechanically, these are no less safe than a striker fire gun or a DASA gun, as long as all of them have been. So what we're dealing with isn't a real safety concern. What it is a perceived safety concern. And how we handle that perceived safety concern in the situation that we're in is going to depend whether that's a positive or a negative for us. I've seen situations where guys who were carrying 1911s, who had stopped a group of local mopes, had one of the mopes point out, hey man, don't mess with him, look, his gun's already cocked, he's ready to go. So all the mopes decided, we probably don't want to fight with that guy today. Now that's a positive advantage for us when we're dealing with mopes who we do want to scare. The problem comes in what happens when we're at Dunkin' Donuts getting our morning coffee, and the mom or kids or somebody else that sees the gun with the hammer cocked says, oh my God, why is the hammer cocked on that gun? Which does happen. That is a legitimate thing that has happened. I've seen that happen to people on other agencies that carry 1911s. I've seen it happen to SWAT guys on their way to call-outs that are carrying 1911s. And it's how you handle that situation that determines whether that ends up being a positive interaction or a negative interaction. If you say, no, you don't know what you're talking about, you're an idiot, there's nothing unsafe about that, I know what I'm doing, the safety's on, any of that stuff, then what you're doing is you're creating a negative interaction where there really doesn't have to be one, and you're adding to the stigma involved with single action, cocked and locked type pistols for duty weapons that keeps them out of the hands of most police officers, including a lot of people who could really benefit from the advantages that they give you. If instead you take the time to explain that this gun actually has an external safety device, and while you can see the hammer on the outside, the guns that all other police officers carry, all the striker fire guns, everybody that carries an XD or a Glock has a completely cocked back or partially cocked, essentially a hammer. It's called a striker inside of the gun. You just can't see it on the outside, but it has no safety on the outside. And look, my gun that I'm carrying has a safety on the outside of it that keeps the hammer from being pulled, and blocks all of the internal components from moving. So this hammer can't fall as long as the safety's on. And the safety's going to stay on, and the hammer can't be touched as long as it stays in my holster. So I carry this gun not because I'm not concerned with safety. I carry it because I am concerned with safety. I want to make sure there's an external safety on my gun, so that way the thing won't just accidentally go off if something gets in the trigger guard when I'm reholstering it. Now, are you being completely 100% honest with people when you tell them that? No, but there is enough of a grain of truth to it. If they go back and Google that later, they're going to find out that what you were telling them was pretty much correct. Striker fire guns, as much as I love them, and you know if you've seen my duty belt video, that's what I carry at work, do have a problem with things can get caught in the trigger guard and the gun can go off. That's not an issue you have with single actions unless the safety's off. And if they ask you, well, why is that any better? You can say, well, because it has an external safety, the trigger can be lighter and crisper and a lot easier to use, and it allows me to be more accurate with the gun. And the last thing that I would ever want is to have to fire my weapon in the line of duty and to accidentally hit someone else because I missed. Having this hammer cocked back and the safety on, carrying this type of gun, lowers the probability of me making that type of mistake and hurting someone, and that's the last thing that I want. Handle your public interactions properly. This disadvantage that a lot of administrators try to avoid by saying you can't have a cocked and locked or a single action pistol as a duty weapon kind of disappears. But the issue is, do you have the gift of gab to pull that off? And you're always going to have the time to have the gift of gab to pull that off. I think for many people, that's probably smart that they not carry a cocked and locked pistol as a duty weapon because they don't have that gift of gab. But for people who do, I think it opens a dialogue between the police officer and the public that shows people that you're considering all of the different safety aspects of what you're doing and how serious you are about your job and about safety and keeping the public safe. Another disadvantage that we have to these is cost. Single action pistols that are fit to be duty weapons are normally exceedingly expensive. And the best of them are very, very expensive. They top out well into the $3,000-$4,000 range, depending on what you're trying to get for a 1911 or a custom Browning high power that's set up just the way you want it. But for that money, you can get it set up literally just the way you want it. And for a stock model, you can get them in pretty much the same price range that you can get a very high quality DASA gun like an HK USP or a SIG 226 or P220 or P227. There is no inherent magazine capacity issue with single action pistols because there's nothing inherent about the single action design that limits the number of rounds that can be in the magazine. Although the most prolific single action designs are single stacks, there are many single action designs, and there are some double action single action pistols like HK USPs and CZ75s that you can carry cocked and locked all the time, and they have double stack magazines. There's also the Browning high power, which has a 13 or 15 round double stack magazine, and you can get up to 20 round double stack magazines. So the magazine capacity issue that a lot of people bring up when dealing with these handguns really isn't a real issue. So in what circumstances would all of that be important, and why would it be super critical in those situations? Well, one is for SWAT teams. If you're on a SWAT team, it's probably a good idea to be carrying a single action pistol if policy allows it, and to be carrying that same gun if you also work patrol or investigations on top of your SWAT duties. Carry that same gun all the time, so your training is uniform between what you're using on SWAT and what you're using in all of your other aspects of police work. And the reason I say that it's hypercritical with SWAT is because the probability with a SWAT team making an assault or an entry and having it turn into a hostage situation is extremely high. Now, yeah, you can make the argument that it's high in patrol too, and it is. It's pretty high. Sometimes patrolmen get called in to do jobs that really should be handled with a SWAT team, but there just isn't the time to organize the team and get them on scene because the situation is extraordinarily time sensitive. But for a SWAT team, when you know you are making entries into structures and that they could very easily potentially become hostage situations, carrying a pistol that gives you every advantage in hitting that little T-zone on the head in order to end that hostage situation with a positive outcome, or at least as positive as it can get, is super, super critical. And remember, with the SWAT team, if we're going to our pistol, that means we've already had multiple system failures because our rifle is already down and we've had to make an assault on a building where there's hostages being held, and none of those are good days for a SWAT team. So if you're all the way down to having your pistol, you want the best pistol to make the most accurate shot as quickly as possible as you can get. And a cocked and locked pistol, especially a full-size 1911, you're really not going to find a much better gun for that purpose. Another would be if policy allows it and you grew up on cock and lock pistols. Let's say your agency says you have to have a 9mm and that you can carry a cock and lock pistol, a striker fire, or a DASA. If you have that ability, it might not be a bad idea to check out a Browning high power if you grew up on 1911s, or if you did a lot of shooting with 1911s in competition and you're going into police work or security work and policy allows it, it might be a good idea to stay with cock and lock, because changing between systems as our primary duty weapon negates a lot of the background training and knowledge that we had from our previous experience with firearms, and there's really no reason to throw that knowledge away just because we got a new job. Also, just like I said about the DASAs, where if you are anticipating long-range shots, let's say you work in a very rural environment, or if you have to deal with a lot of large warehouses where you know you could have a situation where you need to make a long-range precision shot, a single action pistol gives you that long-range precision shot capability every single trigger pull, and it gives you a consistent trigger pull so that you don't have to train on a DA and an SA, and that you don't have to mess with springs or connectors or other internal parts like you would on a striker fire to get the same type of crisp single action trigger on the gun. So I think it's really unfortunate that a lot of police agencies and a lot of security companies do not allow cock and lock pistols for their people. I think that their advantages far outweigh their disadvantages if you can deal with the public stigma and talk to people about it. And realistically, talking to people is 90%, if not more, of the job that we do on a day-to-day basis when we're out on the street actually working. So you need to be able to talk to people, and if you can talk to people and you can give them good knowledge about the equipment that you're using when they ask questions about it, then carrying a cock and lock pistol gives you a lot of advantages that other pistols don't have, and none really of the disadvantages of them. If you like this type of content and you find it helpful at work, or if it gives you new interesting insights into law enforcement that you enjoy, please consider joining the shift over at the Patreon page for a very small donation that allows this channel to continue growing and getting better, and allows me to buy new equipment and have new things like this beautiful table here in order to do videos on. I give you behind the scenes looks at what's coming up, give you sneak peeks of videos before they're even completely done. And you get to see the raw video, which shows you all of the different things I have to do in order to overcome the equipment limitations I have, since I'm running this pretty much off of a picnic table in my backyard with a point and shoot camera. Please check out our other as a duty weapon videos. I have one on revolvers, DASA, and hopefully within the next week or so I'll be pushing out one on striker fires, depending on how that goes. I'm trying to shoot them more or less all in a row so that I can get all the information out so people can check out the different advantages and disadvantages to different types of pistols. You guys be safe, and I will see you next week. I'd like to thank all the Patreon supporters, and especially the shift supervisor level Patreon supporters that we have listed here. Your contributions are what allows free field training to continue on and become better. Thank you. Well, if you like that video, go ahead and subscribe, because there's a whole lot more to come. As soon as I finish up these calls, go 10-8. County 291. 291.